All righty, welcome everyone to this week's live Force event on YouTube here. I hope you guys had a great week. We have a really exciting and extremely informative and provocative and powerful workshop for you guys today to follow along with us. So as I wrote in the notes, get out your sketchbooks, get out your notebooks, get ready to write lots of notes and hopefully learn a great deal of information today. I think things that can very dramatically change your skill level, right, and how you work. So before we jump into it, let's say hello to our other Force instructor. How's it going, Swenley?
Good. Excited for this session as well. This is two of my favorite subjects coming together. So let's go for it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really excited about today. This is something that took me years to recognize, which is the real power in drawing lies behind understanding how 2D and 3D actually start to come together. And we're going to investigate that today for you guys right in front of you and give you tips and tricks as how to merge these two worlds. I truly believe that once you get these two things to work together, man, that makes you explosive. Like it'll change your skill level, like really ramp it up super high to like pro level to understand these two pieces. Now, there's a lot of work that comes in underneath those two to make those two really operate. And we're going to share that with you today. So it may take you some time to really understand what we're talking about today, but I promise you when that happens for you, you're going to go, oh yeah, I remember watching that video. I understand now what they're talking about and how these two things converge, okay? So as always, if you have any questions or comments, write them in the chat. We'll do our best to, to communicate with you. And let's head over to Photoshop. If you like what we're teaching here, then please do hit the subscribe button, right? We want to try and share this information with as many people as we can. If you have any friends that are artists, or if you're in any communities, right? You might be on some Discord or some type of forum or on some social network. Please do share this channel with them. I really want to reach as many people as we can with the Force drawing approach because we believe in it so strongly. And last but not least, hit the bell, right? If you hit the bell, then at least you'll get notified every week of what we're doing and what's coming up. And get ready, to be here on time to be able to watch us live, right? It's fine if you see it afterwards, but what you lose is the opportunity to actually communicate with us. And we're pretty good, I think, at trying to make sure that we communicate with you through the chat, right, and answer your questions, okay? All right, so let's see, I believe I don't think I've empowered you yet with superpowers here, so let's do that. And then Swenley's gonna start us off today. So yeah, it's all yours. Take it away.
Okay, awesome. Let's see, let's go over here. So as Mike explained, we are going to talk about combining the power of 2D and 3D. And what I'm going to share with you guys is how we can take shape, which is essentially 2D flats, and some tricks that you can use to fill the shape with form. So let's start with something very simple. Let's start with the sphere, which in terms of shape is actually just a circle. If you extract all the information about form, you're left with just the flat silhouette, which is a circle, as you can see here. And notice that by just adding some wrapping lines in the form of ellipses, these are just two ellipses. I just erased the back part of it. But notice that those two wrapping lines within the silhouettes of that flat shape, which is a circle, starts tricking our minds into seeing form, but it's still all flat. So it's not an illusion, we just have to understand how to create the illusion of real three-dimensional form on the flat paper. So that's the sphere, and another one would be the box or the cube. So this one is interesting because notice how we start again with a shape, just a silhouette. And depending on what kind of information we fill within that silhouette, it can communicate a different cube. If we put a line right here, then it's like, okay, we're seeing these two planes of the cube, but we can take the same silhouettes and fill it with, we can put the corners of the box in slightly different places. And now we are looking up at the box, and we can see the bottom plane and the side plane and this closest plane. So this goes to show that what happens within the shape, within the silhouette is super, super important. It's very important for you to understand and be clear about what is happening with the form that is within the shape. So let's move to something a little bit more complex, which is the human head. And here I drew a very simple profile of a head. Looks more like a skull, actually, and makes sense because the skull is like the basis for the human head. So I have a simple side view here, so as you see, noted, this is the brow, we have the cheek sticking out and the chin. So what I'm going to do is I duplicated this profile. So let's go here. And using the transform tool, I'm going to place this in the perspective. So let's see. So with perspective, of course, it means that these lines would have to converge towards the vanishing points. So once you understand the principles of perspective, you can easily start creating that illusion. I think I want this to be like coming more towards us, which means that it's going to like pinch even more. Let's see. So this look good. I think this could work. So now I took that profile shot, which gave us the contours of the simplified heads, and I used the transform tool to place this profile in perspective. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'm going to move it closer to us. So basically, I'm taking this and I'm moving it around in 3D space. Now I'm going to make it just slightly bigger to take into account for shortening. Of course, as objects come closer to us, visually they appear to get bigger. So let's see, let's move this around a little bit. So I have a good width. And next, what I'm going to do is, well, first of all, let's mark or let's put some points, some landmarks on that contour. So this is the contour that I started with. So I'm going to pick these points where there are clear angle changes in the form. So here you have this apex here of the brow, you have the inside of the brow, you have the cheek, you have the bottom of the cheek, you have the beginning of the chin, and here we have like the front of the chin here. And notice that because I just took that contour and I projected it closer to us, now we basically have the turning edge or the corner of the form. So that's the one that is closest to us. I'm going to mark these points on the same spots. And now, actually, let's also pick these since we also can see those points. And now notice that we can connect these points. And what starts to happen is that out of these two shapes, so starting with a contour and creating a turning edge, out of that, we're starting to create form. So if I connect all these points, all of a sudden, I have like a solid box form for the head. So I took these two shapes, the contour and the turning edge, and by connecting these dots, I basically like projected the points towards the corner of the form. So the important thing to get out of this is the fact that the contour informs the corner, the turning edge of the form. So what's happening on the outside's contour must also happen on the corner of the form. It wouldn't work if, let's say, this forehead is curving and I come in here at the corner of the form and all of a sudden I make this completely flat, for example. And same here, let's say I completely flatten this brow and I could even make this like a complete flat straight line, which doesn't reflect what's happening on the contour. Then I break the illusion of form, because that wouldn't happen in reality. So I basically use the contour to extrude the form out of it. So I started with a flat shape, kind of like a cardboard cutout in perspective, and I extruded that and created a form by connecting these dots. And if you guys have questions, of course, feel free to write those in the chat. So let's see. So to come back to that point of the contour, get rid of these lines. The contour informs what's happening on the corner. This is what we call the turning edge, meaning where we go from front plane to side plane. So whatever happens here on the outsides must also happen on the insides. And especially when you're dealing with a symmetrical form, so here we could also put a center. The form is symmetrical, which means that everything on one side of the center line needs to be mirrored to the other sides to create the symmetry. So this is what I did here. This goes for any points on this form. Like I could put, for example, I could put a dot here. And if I understand the perspective, so these lines establish the perspective. So all of these go and converge towards a vanishing point on the screen left. And like these guys go and converge towards a vanishing point on the screen right. So I can place a point, let's say I can place a point on this side of the center line, or I can place one on this side, and if I understand the perspective grid that I'm working with, I can use the perspective guidelines to project this point to the other side of the center line, same here. So whatever is happening on one side of the symmetrical form must happen on the other side. If you don't do that, you're going to break the symmetry and thus break the illusion of the form and the structure in 3D space. Now, the next subject to talk about is the center line itself. Like, even if I place the dot here, how do I know, for example, what the distance is between the center line and this dot? Like, how do I know this little distance right here? And same here. I kind of like just eyeballed it. But let's take a look at how you can train your minds to be able to visualize the center line in the correct spot. So let's go to the next slide. So this brings us to structural symmetry, and we did talk about this, I think, maybe a couple of weeks back. But this is the process for finding the center line of a flat plane. So we start with a rectangular plane here, and you mark the corners, and then you create an X. So you create an X from corner to corner, and that gives you the center. So that's, as you can see here, helps us find the center line. And if we take this, and now instead of a flat plane, we take that plane and we place it in perspective, the construction still remains the same. So you find the corners, you draw that X, as you can see here, and that gives you the center line. Now notice that what happens here is because of foreshortening. So if you zoom in here, notice that this distance visually looks longer than this one. Again, it's the combination of 3D and 2D, because I know that this is in space, but actually I think to make it clearer, the way I'm looking at it is, let's look at it as like a flat line. And what's this distance from a flat point of view compared to this one? Like notice that this one is much longer. And this is because of foreshortening, like the name implies, as the distance gets farther away from us in space, visually it becomes shorter. That's what it's called, foreshortening. So with this in mind, if we put the center line like what I did here, this breaks the illusion of symmetry, because this looks more like 1/3 of this plane instead of the halfway points. And same with this one. This one is too close to us, as we saw before. This distance is supposed to be longer because of foreshortening, but here we reversed the relationship. We made the closest half shorter and the farther half longer. And that's now how perspective works. So we broke foreshortening, so the illusion of symmetry is lost. So this is the construction that will help you to eventually just be able to see it and estimate it when you're drawing. Like I spent a couple of years practicing this stuff. So at this point, if the center line is off, I can immediately see it, because my mind has been trained with this simple construction of finding the center line of a plane. Are there any questions, by the way, Mike?
Nope. So far, so good.
Okay, cool. So let's go to the next one. So this is a flat plane, of course. And when we're drawing something like the human figure or the human heads, things aren't this flat and geometric. The forms are a bit more rounded and organic. But you can still use the same construction to help you estimate where the center line would be. So let's say that we have a flat piece of paper or a piece of cardboard even. And you take your pencil and you literally draw the construction that we just went through on that piece of cardboard. So you mark the corners, you connect the corners with an X, which then gives you the center line. And then you take that piece of cardboard and you bend it. What's going to happen? Well, the lines that you drew on that cardboard are going to bend with the cardboard. So the center line is still going to remain in the same place. It's not going to just move around all of a sudden. And the same goes with a more curved plane. We could still use this construction to help you estimate it. But by practicing this one a lot, even if when the surface is curved, you're going to be able to estimate where the center must be in order for you to create the illusion of symmetry. Now, since we're dealing with shape, another thing to be aware of is that the shape of the plane itself can help you identify whether the center line is in the right spot or not, meaning that once I divide that plane into halves, now this is now a shape. So this half is a shape. So let's call this shape number 1. And this other half is also a shape. So this is now shape number 2. So shape number one must look, or I should say, shape number two must look as if it's a symmetrical counterpart of shape number one. The moment those two shapes become too different, then again, we break the illusion of symmetry. So if we look here, for example, well, shape number two is way much more smaller and narrower than shape number one. So I don't really believe that this is symmetrical. Same on this side, like shape number one and shape number two are becoming too drastically different for my mind to believe that this is at the center. So you can look at the shape to help you see the symmetry. So if we go back here, let's see, I still have this one. And I want to quickly change the color. This is better. So following that same idea, let's look at the forehead. So let's call this shape number one and shape number two. And if I mark those two shapes, so this is shape one. And now we have shape two here.
I'm going to step in real quick for 1 second, Swinley. So any of you out there that are like glazing over because of all this, like, perspective conversation, I can't tell you how many times I have this conversation in mentorship, especially for people that I'm helping build portfolios, right? When you're doing like character design and such, this is what artists struggle with. And that is not only the construction of the head, right? But what you're doing is you're trying to find geometry, literally geometric shapes within the head that are built based off of form and construction, which is what Swinley's showing you, in order to turn the head in different angles, in order to do facial expression sheets, right? Because one of the toughest things, if you've tried this, you'll know, one of the toughest things to do is to draw a character's face and then draw it in different angles and draw it in different expressions and stay on model, right? And stay on model. So what Swinley's doing here is showing you the geometry, let's say, of this character's forehead. So the height by the width of the forehead, how to take that and put it in perspective and understand it enough to break it down into geometric forms or shapes, right? And manipulate that in different angles, right? So that's an application of it. But this is where it starts. Instead of us just telling you like, hey, draw characters like this and do this and this, without actually giving you the foundation of how it happens, this is how it happens. This is the actual like artistic math that's going on underneath, this sense of geometry, of perspective and shape and form and how it comes together in an effort to keep things on model. And that's just one version of it. As Counterposter wrote, and I went through this myself as I wrote in the chat, this is great for cars or planes or anything like that, because you take the silhouette, you extrude it, and boom, you've got the width of the car. And then you can manipulate the other axis, but at least you have one axis taken care of, and that gives you the width, which is what Swinley did here on the head, right? And it's super important for you guys to understand that the turning edge, which is the inside edge that Swinley drew here, of that silhouette of the head, is the same as the contour edge, right? And that's what's giving us this really, really clear front plane, right, of the entire face. So we haven't given definition to like the left and right sides. Instead, we took a silhouette and stretched it across the width of the head. And by doing that, you really start to learn, oh, damn, that turning edge, that inside corner that's in the flat shape or silhouette of the head has to match up with the contour, right? And to Swinley's jargon, you're projecting between those points to create perspective, because the angle, right? The angle between 2 points is what gives you the perspective, right? So that's what Swinley's showing you. Then just a couple of the applications of it. For me, it shows up really in everything. I'm very aware of the point-to-point system. When I'm drawing with force, believe it or not, I'm aware of the point-to-point system. I'm just doing it so organically and on the fly that my computer brain is just going through all that stuff very quickly at this point. But I'm very aware of like the beginnings and ends of lines, the apexes of lines, and we've talked about that, right? And here you're learning this sort of, instead of the geometry of just a curve, you're learning the geometry of shapes that create forms, or you could say forms that create shapes, right? And that's what like today's conversation is about. How do those two things merge? Okay, all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Indeed, this is something like super important that I keep bringing up again and again to students. You know, even when we are way past in shape and anatomy, these basic construction ideas. So yeah, the idea of symmetry, you know, and looking at shapes and understanding that the planes of the forms create a shape, you know, so you can use shape to help you define the geometry. So here, notice that I can totally believe that shape number 1 and shape number 2 are each other's like mirror copies, you know, across the center line. The problem would arise if, and actually the problem that I usually see is twofold. Like, first of all, the first problem is not keeping these perspective angles parallel to one another. So let's say that if I take this point and I place its mirror counterpart here, now all of a sudden I'm distorting the form because I'm bending the foreheads, you know, and this happens a lot, you know, and especially if you combine that with a misplaced center line. So let's say I place the center line here, you know, and all of a sudden I created this geometry at the front. So now we have shape number 1, which I definitely don't believe is the mirror copy of shape number 2, because they are two different shapes, clearly, you know. So the perspective angles are important to make sure that, you know, these points stay parallel to each other in perspective, and then being able to use the construction that I showed you earlier to estimate where that center line is going to land, so that this shape and this shape look like they're each other's mirror copy in 3D space. Let's see. Anything else you would like to add to this, Mike, before I move on?
No, I don't think so. It's all good.
Okay, cool. So having said all that, let's see. So we spoke about like this. We spoke about the symmetry. And so, yeah, same as with a flat plane. As you can see, like here is the construction. But if I put the center line here, now all of a sudden, this to this, the difference is too big for me to believe that this is symmetrical. You know, same here. Here the center line is too close. So we need something that is more in the middle, and this construction will help train your brain to find the correct center. Now let's look how this applies to an actual three-dimensional head. And one of the main lessons to get out of this is to think like a sculptor, meaning think in 3 dimensions, you know, even when you want to create shape. And this artwork is made by Joe Lawrence Sculpture. This is the artist's Instagram name. So definitely look him up.
Yeah, if you go over there, you know, tell them we talked about him. Right?
Yeah.
Say, hey, go check out check out this YouTube channel. Yeah, he's got amazing work. He's a new find that I just discovered this past week, and it's such an excellent example of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, he's awesome. As you can see here, he's creating shape, you know, like this very stylized heads. You have very clear shape, but he's sculpting, he's working in 3 dimensions. So it's not like he can take a flat shape, you know, and place it there. He has to use mass to arrive to the shape. And this is the thing to learn out of this, you know, think like a sculptor. So arrive at shape through force and form. Like the head is also very forceful. You know, all these shapes have like a clear sense of direction and movement to them. So if we zoom in, let's look at the simplest part. Like if you look at like the base here, notice that what we talked about earlier, like this is symmetrical, of course. So if we look at the outside edge, which is a curve, notice that what's happening here is also happening on this side. So if you take this flat plane and you extrude it, it gives you the plane on the other sides. So here you can see it happen with actual three-dimensional form. Now let's pick some points. So this has like clear, like hard edges, so like it's easier to find, at least at the bottom. But here, let's see. So we have an arc. I'm looking at where the major like angle change is in that arc, and that's around here. So I can put this point here. And as Mike brought up earlier, perspective is connecting these 2 points. If I connect these 2 points, it gives me a perspective angle, because this exists in 3 dimensions. So it actually gives me a perspective angle. It's the same thing that we are doing on paper. So if I know this perspective angle and I take an angle that is closely parallel to it, let's say I draw an angle like this parallel to the bottom one. So these two would go and converge towards the vanishing point. That allows me to project, we can zoom in even more. This allows me to project this point right here on the other sides of the form. So now I've found this point here. And let's mark these ones as well. So now I have this front plane. And this front plane is a shape. So I can draw and use a shape to describe the geometry of this front plane. And since it's symmetrical, now we have to find the center. So again, if I place the center line here, it doesn't look like the center. It looks more like 1/4 of this whole plane. So the center would have to be somewhere around here. Again, taking into account that this distance is slightly longer than this one because this gets foreshortened. So the center would be around here. And now we divided that big shape into 2 shapes. And I can totally believe that number 1 is the mirror copy of number 2. And we could do the same with another part. So let's say like the neck is more curved. So let's take the neck, for example. And we have like the outside edge here. And let's take this point. And just like with the bottom parts, I'm going to match these perspective angles. And I'm going to put this point. I'm going to take it and project it towards this side. Now, why here? Because here is where we go from the front plane to the side plane. So this is the corner or the turning edge of that form. So again, this gives us a shape. And here we have the center of this whole front plane of the neck. Of course, you have the chin covering it, so it kind of like overlaps a bit of the symmetry, but still this shape and this shape must look as each other's mirror copy. So you can start looking at the shape of those planes and how those shapes, when placed in 3 dimensions, starts describing the geometry that you're dealing with. And we can see this all over the place. Like we have very clear shapes that define the form. You can see the shape here of the cheek. So I could get in here and I could draw all these shapes. It's super clear, so barely takes me any effort to see the shapes. So this starts describing the geometry. Now, if you're a painter, this is super important, because this helps you know where to put the shadow and the light shapes of your subject. So again, the main lesson here is to understand that shape comes from form, so you need to go through force and form first, and that brings you to shape. It's a result of force and form, and those two together start creating a silhouette, which gives you shape. Okay, I'm going to stop here and give it over to Mike. Are you ready, Mike?
I'm ready. Grab this. I want to close up with Joe's work. I'm going to grab a different view, a different photograph I have. Here we go. Okay, so to tie this over from where Swanley just left off, when you're drawing like characters and you're trying, as I said before, you're doing an expression sheet, you don't have clay, you have your drawing ability, and yet you have to draw as well as, or as accurately as something like one of Joe's sculptures is, right? Understanding all that construction. So you have to be thinking this solidly. And that comes from all the stuff that Swanley's already talked about. I just want to put the bug in your head of, that this is the mentality, this mentality of solidity that has to happen, between like what Swanley was talking about. It's like between here and here, and what's the line between here and here on the nose, between here and here on the chin, right? Like being aware of all these different angles from here to here on the brows, from here to here, right? All those moments are stacked angles, right, that create perspective, and again are matching between the contour to the turning edge, right? That, as Swanley did very clearly earlier today, you have that silhouette and you extrude it or project it, and you're recognizing that this inside edge is the thing that people mess up, right? They end up getting this line on the outside, but they don't know that this is really doing the same thing. And the way to find it, is to make sure you get those angles and get over there to mimic or copy over that one line to the other, like Swanley did today. Literally made a copy and connected the dots, right? So use that, keep that in mind. At least it'll give you all the front planes of the face. And the other piece was, we were talking about character design. It's understanding like how do you take a shape on one side and flip it over to the other, and it's finding the geometry, like finding the geometry of these surfaces that come from construction, right? Come from construction. Okay. All right. So on to the next step. What I'm here to talk to you about is how do we bring force into all of this, right? So now what we have going on is force, shape, and form. So shape and form, right? That today's thumbnail and today's conversation is about 2D and 3D art. How do these two things come together, and why do they come together? Who even cares that they come together, right? Does it matter? Does it matter to me? It matters. It matters a lot, right? It matters a lot. There's a lot of power in seeing the simplicity of two-dimensionality. Remember, all of us are drawing on a flat plane, right? What Joe Lawrence was doing there is he's working in three-dimensional space, right? So in a way, it gives him the opportunity to not have to worry about getting the perspective right, because he's making perspective, right? It's auto created by him sculpting, right? You have to make it, right? You have to create it because you're on a 2D plane. So you have to invent 3D space, okay? So we get to the idea of bringing force into these shapes and that they have form. So this is from right out of the Force books. Some of you may recognize this or this page. And, the conversation in the book here is that these are unforceful shapes, right? They're symmetrical. They're just flat geometry. We have a circle, a square, and a triangle, right? We want force shapes. And as all of you probably know at this point, the force shape is more of a straight with a curve, right? Something like this. And that's what this is over here. Well, this even more clearly, very simply. There's my straight, here's my like giant curve. Here, there's two of them. Here's a straight versus a curve. Here's a straight versus a curve, right? And we end up with two of these shapes, right? But we don't want just shape. Shape's not enough. We want form, right? We want to understand that there's three-dimensionality. And in the real world that you and I live in and occupy, the world is three-dimensional. It's not two-dimensional. The drawing world is two-dimensional. So we typically learn from the real three-dimensional world how to draw. So therefore, the books go force, form is number 2, and then shape, right? So we understand these like structures, and then what we're trying to grab hold of here is the understanding that these three-dimensional forms then can be flattened out to two-dimensional shapes, right? So you could take something really complicated like a building or a chair, right? You could try even just drawing a chair from shape and say it looks something like this. All right, I'm just going to draw this really fast, crude shape, right? It looks like this, right? Maybe that other leg's there. But the reason I could draw that shape flatly is because in my mind, right, I obviously was thinking about this, right? It's no accident that I got to this drawing looking like this and working in perspective. I had to know the perspective in order to make that shape. So if you only learn shape, if you're lucky, maybe you'll get some perspective out of it and your eye is trained well enough to see so clearly that you really get the location of things right. You want to know the perspective, right? It's easier. You get through the perspective and it's easier to make good shape because you understand construction and how the world works, to get to this two-dimensional plane and fake and, you know, create the illusion to all of us that we're actually seeing a three-dimensional space, right? We're not. This is all super flat. There's nothing here, right? I can't grab that. It's flat and on my screen, right? So we're trying to mimic the real world on this two-dimensional plane. So force, as I was saying before, is more of getting these straight to curve shapes. So I have my curve and I have my straighter side, right? And I'm drawing it forcefully, right? Don't just draw it graphically, abstractly with just the sense of shape, but try to get the force line in there and get energy. And I want to make sure that it has form in it. All right, here, let me go to a clean sheet because I want to show you something here. So let's draw a shape. Let's go back to this simple shape here. Okay, this is the force. This in the books I call this the force blob. All right, this is the force blob. So copy, paste. There's another one. Paste. There's another one. Right. So we have 3 force blobs. 1, 2, 3. And they all have the same shape. All right. So let's tone them in. Tone it in, tone it in, all right? So they're all the same. And it's not enough. The shape is a shape, it's flat. Right now that's two-dimensional. And this finally showed you at the very beginning of today, this is like saying I have a circle versus I have a sphere, worlds apart, right? Same darn shape, but worlds apart, right? One has three-dimensional form, it's round, the other one is flat. So I have three flat force shapes. Say that fast 10 times. And then I could fill it with form. So I could say in this one, I want the form to be coming out this way. So I'm going to wrap it like this. Right? When you do this, by the way, go all the way through the form. See how I'm going around? You can see the lines lightly on the other side. I'm going through it. That really helps you understand the full roundness. Now I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say, well, what if it goes this way? Same silhouette, right? Isn't that impressive? Here's my illusion, folks, my magic trick. We had flat shapes. I made one look like it's coming down towards us. The other one look like it's coming up towards us. Now let's do both. All right, so this one, I'm going to say the bottom's coming down towards us, and then it's going to flatten out, and then it's going to turn towards us. So now it's bending. Same shape, right? So really powerful, the relationship between knowing that you have such easy control over shapes on a flat screen because they're flat, but you need to know the form and the perspective to really understand the structure that goes inside that, or even more so, what even really created that shape. It was really this form, right? And you need those too. And part of learning how to draw well is understanding like how much form do you need to describe it? And also, if you change a form, how does that affect the shape, right? And Let's see. Goodwin said shape is 2D, form is 3D. Yes, that is 100% correct. And thank you. I see you already answered that, Swimley. Sorry. All right. So you're running the show over there. Let's move forward. This is by Gina, one of our premium members on the website. I just got this today. And ironically, I knew it was going to fit with what we're talking about. Here's her forest blobs, right? You can see she put a cute little face on this. It does look a lot like a worm or a caterpillar, whatever you want to call it. In my animal drawing books, I turned this shape into a seal, all right? So nice fluid shapes, lots of great simple form. Notice the structure is drawn with the same line, the same intention as the drawings of the contours themselves, right? So the line doesn't change, right? You're still drawing with a sense of energy, right? Really nice and clear. You see that? Here she even like toned in some of the negative space on them as well. Look at the depth on these two at the bottom. So the bigger the shape, the closer it comes to camera, the smaller, the more it goes away, right? This is really powerful because now you're not only talking about force, you've got space, right? You got depth going on and you have mass, right? Which are the topics we've been talking about over the last few weeks here on our force channel, right? So man, that is super powerful right there. That leads you to being able to bring this concept over to the figure. This is another student's work. And you can see here, this is starting to turn into bodies. They're a little kooky, right? Not like super anatomical or anything, but they're there and they're starting to work at this very simple generic level. We have bodies that are starting to move with force, that have good shape and have form and direction and space, right? So pretty good jump, right, that happened here. Now, this is more stylized or slightly different stylization. So here we're getting clearer apexes out of those curves. They're getting a little bit more sharpened, right? The peaks are getting more sharpened. So we have this other stylization of these force shapes. These are still force shapes. They're still filled with form, right? Again, this is such an excellent exercise. It's such a great test of where's your skill at. Do you understand how to take these shapes of force and fill them with construction? And you can sit here and do this for years and just come up with all different kinds of things that happen within the silhouettes. We can draw into these silhouettes and it wouldn't change the silhouette, right? I could put stuff inside the shape, the silhouette of the object, and it still wouldn't change the silhouette. Now, for instance, let's talk about that real quick. Let's say I have over here a force blob. Again, I'm going to go for this singular one that's like this. And I say, you know what? It was round, right? So when it's round, it feels like that form matches the silhouette and shape of this, right? But what if I go in here and I say, I want a turning edge in there like that, right? So the form, again, is 100% fully connected to the silhouette, right? They're one and the same thing, right? So if I want to put that turning edge in there, there's probably going to be a corner there. So this might look a little bit more like this now. You see that, right? All of a sudden I've sharpened up the corner, right? So that means down here it might change too, right? Let me grab this other brush, it's a little clearer just to show this. You know, over here I'll probably have the structure. This might be angled more and it might be angled more in that corner, right? I might get more angle in that corner. So the subtle adjustments to the shape were inspired by the construction, right? So again, they both have to be the same. It'd be weird for me to put a sharp turning edge in a round form, right? In a round shape, I should say, right? In a round shape. Doesn't make sense, right? So the exterior, which is a shape, right? The exterior contour that creates a shape or silhouette has to match what's going on inside. It'd be weird for me to say, you know, I'm going to make a very round object and then say, well, I think there's a turning edge right there. Well, okay. And imagine if I did this on the inside. Look at that, right? You can see how broken that is, right? The shape of this is so round here. I'm going to tone it in so you see the shape a little more clearly. All right, look at the shape of that and look at the interior. That is huge. I can promise you in all my years of teaching this is a huge concept we're talking about right here. This is a big mistake that we all see very often in homework assignments, right? is the shape and the interior have to match, right? Construction has to match. And what Swan we talked about before with these like corners, these points, right? Anytime you see a corner in anything like this, and you have that corner on the contour, on the edge of a shape, is there because it's discussing a plane change, you see? So you can't have that corner there and then not have the plane change. Doesn't make any sense, right? Because form and shape are one and the same, okay? So very, very important that you leave here today understanding you need to know your construction, your form, and all of that, and see how that develops these shapes for you. When you get better at this, right, and you start really understanding that construction is developing shapes, not only the silhouette, but shapes inside the silhouette, like on a head, it might be the shape of the eyebrow instead of the shape of the head itself, right? Now you have a shape within a shape, right? When you get good at this, you can actually go right for the shape. You can cut to the chase without having to build the whole thing out and understand that the shape represents the construction, right? It becomes the ambassador of the construction itself at that point. But the only way to get there and to really draw these shapes well is to understand the perspective and construction, right? All right. That was a mouthful of info. Hopefully that all makes sense. Okay, that's what this is all about today. I really want you leaving today understanding this relationship and how important it is, okay? All right, let's keep moving forward. Here's a drawing of mine. I posted on Instagram probably 2 years ago, I would say. Yeah, probably around there. It was a while ago. It's a little more of like an angular, shapy style, right? Kind of like the last, the last blobs that you just saw. Like, look at here, look at the thigh, right? I did this, right? I went like that. I created a sharp corner. I could have rounded that out and said it's like that, right? Instead, I left the crispness of this, right? And I'm looking at that shape versus the inside of the leg right here. That's a forced shape, by the way, right? Because the outside, even though it's got that apex in it, that's a straight to curve right there. Look at the knee, son of a gun, right? Look at the knee, right? So we had the thigh, which did this, and then I get to the knee, and it's curved over here, and notice there's a straight on the inside. Now, a great way to learn shape through the confusion, right, and all the effort and work of construction is tone, right? Tone it in, right? Fill the stuff in, right? It helps you bring forward the idea that you're drawing shapes. That's one of the other secrets to be aware of. Some artists you look at, we're all drawing with line. If you're a line artist, you're drawing with line like we are. And, I might draw this and go like this and draw this. That doesn't mean that I was actually thinking about a shape. You just saw me drawing these lines, but I was drawing for the sake of developing a shape. And you don't know that, right? So, be aware of that. In order for you to get a hold of that, it's great to tone stuff in. It helps you really start developing the shapes that the forms create, right? Okay. So like I said, here's sort of like one style of it, a little more angular. I've got sharper points in it, but I'm still designing with shapes. I'm drawing with shapes, and those shapes come from form. They've come to this place. They look like this because of my understanding of construction and anatomy, okay? All right, let's keep moving. It looks like Swenley's handling the chat finally there. Here's another drawing, similar style, all right, a little more angular. I'm creating sharp points in the corners, but notice all of the shapes. And you can see I'm talking about that over here in these notes. It's the shapes, but also the construction of the shapes, right? And I'm trying to merge these two things together. If you go just for shape, you'll end up with a flat drawing, right? There's like little nuances that happen in the shapes that have to work in order to really create the construction of the shape. There's overlaps and perspective, right? Surface lines and form, ellipses, turning edges, cross contours, right? All this other stuff that we teach before we get students to shape, because we know that comes first, right? And that gets you to something like this that looks very simple, right? Suddenly looks really simple. It's very shape driven. Well, but I got here through all of the construction stuff that's going on in my head. And I guess that's what happens. The construction finally takes like a back seat and the shape takes the front seat, but I'm drawing the shapes of forms, all right? Let's write that down, right? This is a good note for you to stick in your notebook right now, right? Drawing shapes of forms. It's almost like saying form follows function. Really what we're saying is this comes first and I'm drawing the shape of it, right? So my mind is thinking about this, but drawing the shape of it, right? And I need to I might need some notes of that construction inside the shape, like Swenley did with the boxes at the beginning of today, to clarify what that form's look, space is, what its orientation in space is, right? Okay. So this is from the Force Drawing books. This is from the 10th anniversary edition. And this was in the book since the very beginning. Here are some figure drawings of mine. And you can see I'm pulling out these shapes. Yeah, these drawings are 25 years old, right? That's how old these drawings are. So you can see I was still teaching the same thing. It hasn't changed, folks, right? Quarter of a century of the same info, right? It hasn't changed, which shows you just how well it works, because I've had no reason to change this. It works, right? So look at the straight to curve of the back to the front of the ribs, or the bottom of the leg to the top of the thigh. Notice how perfectly in this one, shape 4, 5, and 6, how they overlap and intersect into one another like perfectly. It's like this flip-flopping of these shapes. But there's form, right? What's creating those shapes and allowing me to even see them is all the anatomy and all the form that's making up those shapes. When you get good at it, right, when you really understand what's going on, then sure, go for it. Go for the shape, right? I might say, well, I want the shape of her torso. It's like this, right? It's like this. So I understand the straight to curve, but I need to know that the reason I got to that is because of all this architecture, right? Look at the construction of her body. There's that center line, right? A rib cage is going to be in here, right? Look at how this has a twist in it. So her rear end is showing up over here. We have this whole back plane. That's why the shape looks the way it does, okay? It is like fruit slices, half pizza pies, lemon slices. Yeah, there's been a lot of names for, for the Force shape in 25 years. Here's another drawing of mine. This is also from the same book. Look at this leg. Like, I can't be more obvious in this, right? If you know what I'm teaching and you look at my work, you'd be like, oh, son of a gun. Like, look at that shape. Look at that shape, right? This is another straight to curve. There's another straight to curve, right? Here's another straight to curve, right? They're all over the place. That's all I'm doing. You wouldn't know it really unless you knew the secret. So here's the secret, right? All this construction, all of the overlap helps, all the anatomy helps with it, but I'm drawing straight to curve shapes just all over the place, right? And that leads to what we did on our 100th meeting, which was how many poses are we going to draw in an hour's time? I think we did over 100 poses, something like 112 or something or other. So I drew my 38. I did 38 poses in like those 45 minutes because we started 15 minutes in. And the way I got there, the way I got to these drawings is everything that we're sharing with you today. My shortcut, my fast track to getting these bodies drawn was shape, because of all the form that I understood, right? So form helped me draw these shapes. Each one of these drawings is probably no more than a minute or around a minute max. I think I had a timer out and I was trying not to go over that minute spot, right? And they're all coming from that. So you could see if you look around, they look very gestural. They don't look shapy actually, because I'm drawing fast. They have a lot of force line in it. There's a lot of variation in the line so that organicness disguises the geometry of shape, but they're shape with little hints of form at this point that are forceful shapes to make sure everything's moving, right? And then that's how you get to draw full figures in under a minute, right? Like that's pretty amazing if you could do full figure drawings in under 1 minute, right? Okay, so that brings me to the last part of my conversation, and here we are at already the time, but let's talk about it real quick. The body has these big shapes, and this does go through a hierarchical approach down to even the anatomy. So the shapes of anatomy are based on or sit first inside the shell of the shape of the main form. Like we might have the shape of the whole arm, right? Let's see, where is that image? Here it is. So you might have the shape of the whole arm. It looks something like this. This is the shape of this, believe it or not, right? Like this is what first goes through my head, the shape of it and the perspective of it. It's that simple, right? And then it gets broken down into all this minutia, but this has to hold up. No matter how much noise and how many bumps I throw on top of this, I have to hold this up, hold this idea up, you see? And I can curve it like this. What I can't do is cut in and concave it. The arm always arcs like this, right? Now, going back to this, just as an example, one of my favorite areas to talk about when it comes to force shape is the deltoid, right? So you can think of the deltoid like this, where it's just a straight like triangle. So now it's just a bad, unforceful shape, right? It's symmetrical, it's not doing anything. But look at the one I drew here, right? Wow, we're saying like this is pushing up this way, and then it's sweeping down like this. So now this is my straight right here, right? This is my straight, S for straight. This is my curve, you see? So now I've kind of supported, I've shoved this like barricade up over here, right? It's like I pushed up that straight line up against the blob of the deltoid and let it push its way up and out, right? And there it is, right? That shape is sitting inside a smaller shape, right? Which is the deltoid versus the whole arm. So that's what's going on in the tricep. You know, you can see the tricep muscle. There's like a smaller curve against a much longer one versus a straight, which is an acceptable force shape, by the way, right? Like it's this to this, right? So no accident again that I drew that, by the way. Whoops. Let's see, one. You know, that this shape looks like that, okay? You can see here, I'm talking about the silhouette of the arm and how I'm seeing the shapes of the forms, right? Here's a leg. This is all from the Force Anatomy book, by the way. It's like seeing the general shape of the upper leg, and then inside that shape is nested the area for the quadriceps, right? And that quadricep shape gets nested again with each of the quads. And each one of those are forceful shapes. So forceful shapes inside of forceful shapes inside of forceful shapes. It's like those little Russian wooden dolls, right? It's like one thing inside of another, inside of another, inside of another, right? And then that's what I'm using here. You know, when I draw the shape of a leg, I understand its form. That's how I got to the shape, right? So that's it. That's everything I got. I hope you guys enjoyed today. This is an extremely, extremely important video. Like, mark it off, save it, come back to this video, okay? It really discusses how 2D and 3D combine, right? And make sure that you're aware of that when you're drawing. You want to understand the forms of things and how those forms create silhouettes, right? It's going to, no matter what, a form will make a shape, right? And you want to be aware of that. Be aware of the relationship between the two, okay? All right, let's say our goodbyes. And thank you, Swenley, for all of your super clear, informative slides today and demonstrations. Thank you guys for showing up today. I hope that you learned as much as we were inspired to teach you. I hope that you got out of it what we were trying to share with you. And we will see you next week, right, with another Force Friday, okay? Take care, Swenley. Take care, everybody.
Yes, you guys. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.